Don't touch anything without permission, the head servant whispered as they approached the obsidian wing. Her grip on Lira's arm was tight enough to bruise. Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever you do, don't stare at his legs. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get to the story. Lira's stomach twisted. His legs. The woman's eyes darted nervously. The king was crippled 6 months ago. Assassination attempt. Poisoned blade. She lowered her voice further. They say he's gone mad from the pain. Violent. Unpredictable. The last 3 attendants didn't even last a morning. Then why send me? Lira asked, though she already knew the answer. Because she was expendable. A border village girl whose family had fallen into poverty. No title. No connections. No one who'd ask questions if she disappeared. The servant didn't answer. She didn't need to. The corridor stretched endlessly before them, black marble reflecting torchlight like dark water. Each step felt heavier than the last. Lira focused on breathing, on the worn fabric of her uniform, on anything except the growing weight of dread in her chest. Too soon, they stopped before iron-reinforced doors. The new maid for His Majesty, King Kael Dravaryn, the servant announced to the guards. One guard smirked. Another one? What's this, the 15th this month? 20th, the other corrected. He looked Lira up and down with undisguised pity. You seem like a nice girl. My advice? Run screaming within the first hour. It's what smart ones do. Heat crept up Lira's neck, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd spent years being dismissed, overlooked, treated like she didn't matter. These guards were no different from her village's merchants who'd cheated her family, or the apothecary master who'd refused to hire her because she was just a girl. She'd survived all of them. She'd survive this too. I appreciate the advice, Lira said quietly, meeting the guard's eyes. But I intend to stay. Before she could brace herself, they pushed the doors open and shoved her inside. The lock clicked with terrible finality. The antechamber swallowed her in shadow. Heavy curtains blocked most of the light, and the air felt thick, oppressive. Her wolf stirred uneasily, hackles rising at the overwhelming presence of alpha power saturating every surface. The scent hit her like a physical force, pine, smoke, and something wild and dangerous that made her instinct scream to submit, to lower her eyes, to make herself small. She stayed perfectly still, waiting. Then from the darkness, "Who are you?" The voice was cold, sharp as a blade's edge. Not a question. A challenge. "Lira Rowan, Your Majesty," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was sent to leave." The command cracked through the air like a whip. Her wolf whimpered, wanting to obey, to flee from the Alpha's displeasure. But then she heard it, a soft, pained intake of breath. A muffled curse. Against every survival instinct, against the screaming voice in her head telling her to run, Lira moved forward. Her feet carried her through the antechamber toward the adjoining chamber, toward the source of that sound. The living quarters were dimly lit by a dying fire. And there, silhouetted against the window, sat the Alpha King. His hand pressed against his temple, jaw clenched, eyes squeezed shut in obvious pain. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with sharp features and dark hair falling across his forehead. Handsome, she realized with a jolt, beneath all that barely contained rage. He hadn't heard her approach. "Are you all right?" The words escaped before she could stop them. His eyes snapped open, ice blue and furious, locking onto hers with predatory focus. "Who gave you permission to enter?" he snarled. Lira's breath caught in her throat. Because that's when she saw it. The wheelchair. The legendary Alpha King Kael Dravaryn, the warrior who'd conquered 3 territories before his 25th birthday, the ruler whose very name made enemies tremble. Couldn't walk. She stared, unable to hide her shock, and his expression turned to ice. 3 days later, Lira was fairly certain of 2 things. First, the king wasn't going to kill her. At least, not today. Second, he watched her like a predator studying prey, waiting for her to reveal her true purpose. She'd heard the whispered theories from other servants. Some thought she was a spy sent by rival packs. Others believed she was an assassin finishing what the first attempt had started. A few even suggested she was a political pawn, sent by some scheming noble family to seduce the crippled king. None of them knew the truth. She was just a desperate girl from a border village, sent because her family needed the wages and the palace needed someone foolish enough to take the position. But she'd made it to day 3. Something the palace staff called nothing short of miraculous. Most attendants were dismissed within hours. One maid had lasted exactly 40 minutes before fleeing in tears, claiming the king had threatened to feed her to his wolves for folding his shirts incorrectly. Lira moved carefully through the king's chambers, dusting shelves with meticulous attention. Every item had to be replaced in its exact position. The curtains drawn precisely 3/4 of the way. The temperature kept cool but not cold. She'd learned these unspoken rules by observing his reactions, the slight tightening of his jaw when something displeased him, the way his fingers drummed against his wheelchair's armrest when his patience wore thin. Like right now. Surely you must be finished by now. His voice cut through the silence, cold and sharp. The gold ring appeared on the 3rd morning. Lira noticed it immediately, a thick band set with a dark ruby, carelessly left on the edge of the king's writing desk. The kind of ring that could feed her entire village for a month. She dusted carefully around it, not touching, not even letting her cloth come close. From his position near the window, Kael watched her with predatory stillness. His eyes tracked every movement of her hands, waiting. She moved to the next shelf without a glance back at the ring. By afternoon, a second piece had appeared, an emerald brooch pinned halfway behind a stack of books, as if it had fallen there accidentally. Lira retrieved the books, dusted beneath them, and carefully replaced everything exactly as she'd found it. The brooch remained untouched. Kael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The 3rd day, he left a small leather pouch on the floor near her cleaning supplies. It had fallen open, revealing a cascade of golden coins. Lira stepped around it, fetched her bucket, and continued scrubbing the hearth. When she finished her duties and curtsied her way out, the pouch remained exactly where it had been, coins glinting in the firelight. "You're still here." It wasn't a greeting. Kael's voice held something close to accusation as Lira entered his chambers the following morning. "Yes, Your Majesty." She kept her eyes lowered respectfully, moving toward her cleaning supplies. Most servants would have pocketed something by now. Lira paused, uncertain how to respond. Was this permission to speak? A test? She chose her words carefully. "I was hired to clean your chambers, Your Majesty. Not to take what doesn't belong to me." Silence stretched between them, heavy and assessing. "How noble," Kael said finally, his tone impossible to read. Lira said nothing. She'd learned that responding to his provocations only made things worse. She began her work, moving through the familiar routine. Dust the shelves. Straighten the already straight books. Check that the curtains were drawn to exactly 3/4. A soft sound made her turn. The king had slumped in his wheelchair, head tilted back, eyes closed. His breathing had deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep. Lira hesitated, cloth in hand. She should leave. Let him rest undisturbed. But then she saw it. His ceremonial dagger, the one he always kept sheathed at his side, had slipped free and lay on the floor beside his wheelchair. The blade was exposed, wickedly sharp, close enough that if he moved suddenly he could hurt himself. Lira's heart jumped into her throat. She moved quietly across the room, hardly daring to breathe. The dagger was beautiful and deadly, its hilt inlaid with silver wolves. She picked it up carefully, reverently, and looked for its sheath. There, attached to the wheelchair's side. She slid the blade home with a soft click, adjusting the buckle so it wouldn't slip free again. When she looked up, Kael's eyes were open and fixed on her with laser intensity. Lira froze, dagger still in her hands. She started, taking a step back. It fell. I didn't mean to. You didn't take it. His voice was soft, almost wondering. Not angry. Confused. Of course not, Your Majesty. It's yours. It's worth more than you'll make in 5 years of service. Lira blinked. That doesn't make it mine. Something flickered across his face, an emotion she couldn't name. He stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, equation that refused to balance. Leave, he said finally, but his voice had lost its sharp edge. Lira curtsied and fled. The food tasting demand came a week later. Lira had just brought his lunch tray, roasted pheasant, winter vegetables, fresh bread still warm from the kitchen. She set it on his table as instructed, checking that everything was arranged properly. "Stop." She froze at his command. Kael wheeled himself closer, studying the tray with narrowed eyes. Then he looked at her, his expression hard and unreadable. "Taste it." Lira's stomach dropped. "Your Majesty?" "The food. Taste it." His voice was cold, clinical. "Everything on this tray. Now." Heat flooded her cheeks. This was the test servants whispered about, the one that sent most fleeing in tears or outrage. The implication was clear: "I think you might be trying to poison me." Most would protest. Refuse. Storm out in wounded dignity. Lira simply nodded. She picked up his fork, cut a small piece of pheasant, and brought it to her lips. The meat was tender, perfectly seasoned. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and waited a moment before moving to the vegetables. Then the bread. The wine. The berry compote. Kael watched her with unblinking intensity, his hands gripping his wheelchair's armrests. When she'd finished, Lira set down the fork and met his eyes calmly. "It's safe, Your Majesty." "How do you know?" The question came sharp and fast. "Poison can take hours to work." "Some poisons, yes." Lira's voice remained steady, matter-of-fact. "But most commonly used toxins have immediate tells: taste, smell, the way they coat your tongue. Nightshade leaves a bitter aftertaste. Arsenic smells faintly of almonds. Wolfsbane causes tingling in the lips within seconds." Kael's eyes widened fractionally. "How do you know that?" Lira hesitated. She'd already said too much. "I grew up working in the Royal Apothecary District," she admitted quietly. "My mother was an herbalist. I learned to identify most common toxins by the time I was 12. An herbalist's daughter." Kael's voice had gone very soft, very dangerous. "How convenient." "Your Majesty. You can recognize poisons. You know which ones kill quickly and which ones kill slowly." He leaned forward, his gaze pinning her in place. "Tell me, Lira Rowan from the Apothecary District, why should I trust you anywhere near my food?" The question hung between them like a blade. Lira's throat tightened, but she forced herself to hold his stare. "Because if I wanted to poison you, Your Majesty, I would have done it already. And you would never have seen it coming." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, not defiant, just honest. Tired of being tested, tired of being suspected, tired of walking on eggshells around a king who seemed determined to find betrayal in every kindness. Kael went very still. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Lira's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd overstepped. Spoken too freely. She'd be dismissed for certain now, or worse. "Get out," Kael said quietly. Lira curtsied and left, her hands trembling. She didn't see the way Kael stared after her, expression troubled and thoughtful. Or the way his fingers absently touched the dagger she'd returned to its sheath. The days blurred into a strange, tense rhythm. Lira cleaned. Kael watched. She learned to read his moods in the set of his shoulders, the tap of his fingers, the particular quality of his silences. She learned that he slept poorly. She could tell from the darkness under his eyes and the empty coffee cups that accumulated overnight. She learned that he spent hours staring out the window at the palace grounds below, his expression distant and haunted. She learned that he was lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely. It showed in the way he sometimes started to speak to her, then stopped himself. In the way his eyes followed her movements even when he pretended to read. In the way he kept finding excuses to keep her in his chambers longer, a shelf she'd missed, a task not quite done to his standards, always something. He was testing her, yes. But he was also, she realized, just desperate for company he didn't have to fear. The thought broke her heart. It happened on a grey afternoon 2 weeks into her service. Lira was dusting the high shelves, balanced carefully on a step stool. The king was at his desk, supposedly reviewing documents, though she'd noticed he'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. Without thinking, she began to hum. It was an old tune from her village, simple, sweet, the kind mothers sang to restless children. Her own mother had hummed it while mixing medicines, and Lira had carried the melody with her like a talisman. She didn't realize she was doing it until the sound filled the quiet room. Lira froze, hands suspended mid-dust, waiting for the sharp command to stop. To be silent. To remember her place. It didn't come. She risked a glance over her shoulder. Kael sat motionless at his desk, his head slightly tilted, listening. His expression had softened in a way she'd never seen before, the hard edges smoothed, the constant suspicion momentarily forgotten. He looked peaceful, almost vulnerable. Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them. Something warm and fragile and dangerous. Lira quickly looked away, her cheeks heating. But she didn't stop humming. And Kael didn't tell her to stop. The melody wound through the chamber like a gentle thread, connecting them in a way that words never had. For just a few minutes, the walls came down, his suspicion, her careful distance, the roles that kept them separated. For just a few minutes, they were simply two lonely souls sharing the same space. When Lira finished her work and curtsied to leave, Kael spoke. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. "Same time." It wasn't a question. But his voice held something new, not quite warmth, but not ice either. Something like hope. "Yes, Your Majesty," Lira whispered. As she closed the door behind her, she didn't see the way Kael's hand pressed against his chest, right over his heart. Or the way his wolf stirred restlessly inside him, recognizing something his human mind refused to accept. "Mate," his wolf whispered. "Ours." Kael pushed the thought away violently. Impossible. But as he sat alone in the growing darkness, he could still hear the echo of her humming. And for the first time in 6 months, the silence didn't feel quite so suffocating. That night, Kael made a decision. If Lira was truly innocent, truly as honest and genuine as she appeared, she would pass one final test. And if she was hiding something, if she was part of some elaborate plot, then he would know. He would know for certain. Even if the truth destroyed him. Kael couldn't sleep. He lay in the darkness of his bedchamber, staring at the ceiling, his wolf pacing restlessly beneath his skin. 3 weeks. 21 days since Lira Rowan had walked into his chambers and refused to leave. 21 days of watching her move through his space with quiet grace. 21 days of her humming those soft melodies that somehow eased the constant ache in his chest. 21 days of her proving over and over that she was exactly what she appeared to be. Too perfect, his mind whispered. Too gentle. Too convenient. His wolf snarled in disagreement, pushing against his consciousness with unusual force. "Mate. Ours. Safe. Ours." Kael shoved the feeling down violently, jaw clenched. No. He couldn't, believe it. Fate wouldn't be so cruel as to send him a mate now, when he was broken and paranoid, when he trusted no one, when assassins lurked in every shadow. When his own sister had tried to kill him. It had to be a trap. An elaborate, patient, perfectly executed trap. Someone had sent her. Someone had trained her to be exactly what he needed. Soft where he was hard, gentle where he was cruel, steady where he was volatile. They'd taught her to hum those songs, to clean with meticulous care, to look at him without pity. They'd made her perfect. And he was falling for it like a fool. Kael's hands fisted in his sheets, his breathing harsh in the quiet room. He needed to know. Needed to be certain. One final test, one that would reveal the truth, no matter how much it cost. Because if she was truly innocent, if she was truly loyal, she would prove it. And if she wasn't, better to know now. Before his heart became any more entangled. Before his wolf's insistence became impossible to ignore. Before he started to hope. The plan took 3 days to arrange. Kael called in a favor from Lord Garrett Runlock, a distant noble who visited court twice a year and whom Lira had never met. Similar build, similar age. Easy enough to impersonate. "You want me to do what?" Garrett stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Lend me your signet ring and your house colors," Kael repeated calmly. "And leave the palace for a week. Tell no one." "Your Majesty, with all due respect. I need to test someone's loyalty." Kael's voice went cold. "And I need to be certain she doesn't recognize me." Garrett's expression shifted to understanding. "A potential spy?" "Perhaps." Kael didn't elaborate. "Will you help me or not?" The Lord hesitated, then sighed. "You've been different since the assassination attempt. More careful. I suppose I can't blame you." He pulled the ring from his finger. "But if this goes badly, I was never here." Agreed. Kael chose his moment carefully. Late afternoon, when most servants were changing shifts, Lira would be returning from the kitchens with his evening tea, walking through the less-traveled corridors of the East Wing. He waited in an alcove, dressed in Renlock's deep blue doublet and silver cloak, the noble's signet ring heavy on his finger. He darkened his hair slightly with ash, changed his posture, adopted the lord's characteristic swagger. His wolf howled in protest, sensing the trap, hating the deception. Kael ignored it. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, light, familiar. His enhanced hearing picked up the soft sound of her humming, that same gentle melody that had haunted his dreams. His chest tightened. Don't let her be false, something in him whispered. Please. He stepped out of the alcove just as she rounded the corner. Lira stopped short, nearly dropping the tea tray. Oh. I'm sorry, my lord, I didn't. No apology necessary. Kael pitched his voice slightly higher, adopting Renlock's aristocratic drawl. Though I must say, I don't recall seeing such a lovely face among the palace staff before. Lira's expression shuttered immediately, polite but distant. I serve in His Majesty's private chambers, my lord. We don't often venture into the public halls. Ah. Kael moved closer, deliberately invading her space. The crippled king's attendant. How charitable of you. Something flashed in Lira's eyes, sharp and hot. But she kept her voice level. If you'll excuse me, His Majesty is expecting his tea. She tried to step around him. Kael shifted, blocking her path. His wolf snarled viciously, hating him for doing this. Surely you can spare a moment, he said, letting his gaze travel over her in a way that made his own skin crawl. It must be terribly dull, serving a broken alpha who can barely leave his rooms. A pretty girl like you deserves better company. Lira's hands tightened on the tray, her knuckles white. I need to go. Does he even appreciate you? Kael pressed, hating every word that left his mouth. A king bound to a wheelchair, locked away in his chambers. What kind of life is that? What kind of future? Stop. Her voice had gone quiet, dangerous. I could offer you so much more, Kael continued, each word like swallowing glass. My estate, my protection. You wouldn't have to waste your youth caring for an invalid who... I said stop. The command cracked through the air like a whip. Lira's eyes blazed with fury, her entire body trembling, not with fear, but with rage so pure it took Kael's breath away. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you speak of him like that? Kael's heart stuttered. I only meant. The king is twice the man you could ever hope to be. Her voice shook, but not with weakness. With conviction. With absolute, unwavering certainty. His strength has nothing to do with his legs. Nothing to do with whether he can walk or run or fight. She stepped forward, forcing Kael back with the sheer force of her anger. He survived an assassination attempt that would have killed anyone else. He rules a kingdom from a wheelchair with more authority than most men wield with armies at their back. He endures pain and isolation and constant suspicion, and he still gets up every morning and does his duty. Tears streaked down her cheeks now, hot and fierce. So don't you dare, reduce him to his injury. Don't you dare imply that he's less than whole, less than worthy, less than. Her voice broke. He's the strongest person I've ever known, she whispered. And I would rather spend 1 hour in his presence than a lifetime with someone like you. Kael couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't process the raw emotion in her voice, the fierce loyalty, the absolute faith. In him. She believed it. Every word. She wasn't performing, wasn't calculating, wasn't playing a role. She meant it. Mate, his wolf whispered, satisfied and smug. Told you. Hours. Lira, Kael breathed, his voice cracking back to its normal register. She froze, her eyes going wide. Kael reached up with shaking hands and wiped the ash from his hair, straightened his posture, let her see the truth. Your Majesty? Lira's voice was barely audible. The color drained from her face. No, this was. Understanding dawned in her eyes like a sunrise, terrible and beautiful and devastating. You tested me, she whispered. With this. You actually thought I would. Lira. You thought so little of me? Her voice broke on the words, raw and agonized. After everything, after 3 weeks of proving myself every single day, you still believed I could betray you so easily? I needed to be certain. Of what? Tears spilled freely now, and these weren't tears of anger. These were tears of heartbreak. That I wasn't some kind of spy? Some assassin playing the long game? What else could I have possibly done to earn even a fraction of your trust? Kael reached for her. Please, let me explain. Lira jerked back like his touch would burn her. Don't. Her voice was hollow, empty. Just, don't. The tea tray slipped from her nerveless fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Neither of them looked at it. I defended you, Lira said softly, staring at the broken porcelain. I defended your honor, your strength, your worth. I meant every word. And you knew I would, because you heard me. You heard everything I said about you. She finally looked up at him, and the pain in her eyes nearly drove Kael to his knees. And it still wasn't enough. Lira, please. I thought. She laughed bitterly, the sound cracking. I actually thought we were becoming, that you might eventually, but you can't, can you? You can't trust anyone. Not really. Not even someone who's proven her loyalty 100 times over. That's not fair. Fair. Lira's voice rose sharply. You disguised yourself. You cornered me in a hallway. You deliberately tried to seduce me away from you, just to see if I would break. And you're talking to me about fair. Kael had no answer. Because she was right. About all of it. I'm not angry that you tested me, Lira said quietly, her fight draining away into exhaustion. I understand why you're paranoid. I understand that someone hurt you, betrayed you, tried to kill you. I understand that trust is difficult. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But this wasn't about trust. This was about cruelty. This was about proving to yourself that everyone will eventually disappoint you, betray you, leave you. You weren't testing my loyalty, you were confirming your own isolation. Each word landed like a physical blow. And the worst part? Lira's voice dropped to barely a whisper. The worst part is that I think you wanted me to fail. Because if I failed, you could push me away. You could go back to being alone, being suspicious, being safe. That's not, Kael started, but the words died in his throat. Because wasn't it true? Hadn't some part of him hoped she would reveal herself as false, so he wouldn't have to risk hoping? So he wouldn't have to risk caring? The silence stretched between them, heavy and terrible. I can't do this, Lira finally said. I can't keep proving myself to someone who will never believe the proof. I can't pour my loyalty into a vessel with no bottom. She stepped back, creating distance that felt like miles. I'll finish out the day, she said, her voice professionally empty. And then I'll request a transfer to other duties. You can find another attendant. One you trust more than me. Lira, don't. Goodbye, Your Majesty. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Kael stood frozen, watching her disappear around the corner. His wolf howled inside him, anguished, furious, devastated. Fix it, his wolf snarled. Go after her. Stop her. But Kael couldn't move. Because what could he say? What words existed that could undo this? That could explain the poison of suspicion that had infected every corner of his heart? She was right. About everything. He'd sabotaged the one genuine connection he'd had since the assassination attempt. He'd destroyed the fragile trust she'd offered him, day after careful day. He'd proven her worst fear true, that no amount of loyalty would ever be enough. Kael's legs gave out, his real legs, the ones that worked perfectly well, and he sank to the floor among the shattered porcelain and spilled tea. For the first time since the poisoned blade had pierced his side 6 months ago, Kael Dravaryn allowed himself to break. And there was no one there to see it. No one except the wolf inside him, whimpering for the mate he'd just driven away. Hours later, a servant found him still sitting there, staring at nothing. Your Majesty? Are you? Get out, Kael said hoarsely. The servant fled. Kael stayed on the floor as night fell and the palace grew quiet around him. He'd gotten his answer. His proof. Lira was real. Her loyalty was genuine. Her care for him was true. And he'd destroyed it with his own hands. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 6 months hiding his ability to walk, pretending to be broken. But the truth was so much worse. His legs worked fine. It was his heart that was crippled. And unlike his manufactured injury, this brokenness was entirely real. Princess Selene arrived like spring sunlight breaking through winter clouds. She swept into the East Wing 3 days after Lira's confrontation with Kael, her golden hair perfectly coiffed, her silk gown the color of morning sky. Servants bowed as she passed, their faces lighting up at the sight of the beloved princess who'd been away visiting the Northern Territories during her brother's recovery. Lira was carrying fresh linens to the storage closet when Selene's voice stopped her in the corridor. "You must be Lira." Lira turned, curtsying automatically. "Your Highness." Selene studied her with eyes the same ice blue as her brother's, but somehow warmer. "Kinder." She smiled, and it was like watching roses bloom. "I wanted to thank you," the princess said, gliding closer. "My brother wrote that you've been caring for him these past weeks. That can't have been easy." "It's my duty, Your Highness." "Duty." Selene's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her gaze, too quick to catch, too subtle to name. "How wonderfully dedicated you are." She reached out and took Lira's hand in both of hers. Her skin was soft, her grip gentle, but Lira felt an inexplicable urge to pull away. "I know my brother can be difficult," Selene continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The assassination attempt changed him, made him suspicious of everyone, even me, his own sister." She laughed lightly, as if it were a joke. "But you mustn't take it personally, dear. He's been hurt so badly, betrayed so thoroughly. It's made him see enemies in every shadow." "I understand," Lira said quietly. "Do you?" Selene's eyes searched hers. "I worry about the people close to him. They become targets sometimes. Of his paranoia. Of court politics." Her grip tightened fractionally. "If anything were to happen, if you ever felt unsafe, you would come to me, wouldn't you? I would protect you." The words were perfect. Concerned. Sisterly. But beneath them, Lira heard something else. Something that made her skin prickle with instinctive warning. "Threat." "That's very kind, Your Highness," Lira managed. Selene released her hand and stepped back, that radiant smile back in place. "I should go see my poor brother. I'm sure he's missed me terribly." She glided away, leaving behind the faint scent of roses and something else, something sharp and chemical that Lira's apothecary training recognized but couldn't quite place. Lira stood frozen in the corridor, heart pounding. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Lira hadn't seen Kael in 3 days. She'd requested a transfer, as promised, and been reassigned to the lower kitchens. The work was harder, the hours longer, but at least she didn't have to face the king who'd broken her heart while confirming every fear she tried not to have. At least she didn't have to hum in those empty chambers and pretend her chest didn't ache. She was hauling water from the well when the guards found her. "Lira Rowan?" Her stomach dropped. "Yes. You're to come with us. Immediately." "What? Why?" "The king demands your presence. Now." They didn't give her time to clean up, to change from her work-stained dress, to prepare. They simply escorted her, one on each side, hands hovering near their swords, through the palace corridors. Lira's mind raced. What had she done? Had her transfer request somehow offended him? Had she broken some protocol she didn't know about? The guards led her not to Kael's chambers, but to the formal audience hall. The massive doors swung open, revealing a scene that made Lira's blood run cold. Kael sat in his wheelchair at the head of the room, his face carved from stone. To his right stood Princess Selene, her expression grave and sorrowful. Guards lined the walls. Court officials whispered among themselves. And on the table before them sat a small glass vial filled with dark liquid. "Lira Rowan," Kael's voice echoed through the hall, formal and distant. "Step forward." Lira's legs felt like water, but she obeyed. "Your Highness," Selene said softly, touching her brother's shoulder. "Perhaps we should do this privately." "No." Kael's jaw was tight. "If charges are being brought, they will be witnessed." "Charges?" Lira's heart hammered against her ribs. Celine sighed, the picture of reluctant duty, and picked up the vial. This was found in your quarters this morning, Miss Rowan. Hidden beneath your mattress. What? I've never seen that before in my life. The palace apothecary has identified it as hemlock extract, Celine continued, her voice heavy with regret. A deadly poison. Enough to kill a grown man within hours. The room erupted in whispers. Lira felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. No, I didn't, I would never. Multiple servants have reported seeing you visit the apothecary district on your days off, Celine said. Each word was delivered with perfect, devastating precision. Meeting with herbalists. Purchasing ingredients. Because the king's pain balm needed refilling. Lira's voice cracked. He asked me to, I was just getting the supplies he needed. She turned to Kael, desperate. Your Majesty, please. You know me. You know I would never. But Kael's face was unreadable, his eyes cold and distant. He didn't believe her. After everything, after 3 weeks of loyalty, after defending him with her whole heart, after having that loyalty tested and proven, he still didn't believe her. I didn't do this, Lira whispered. Please. You have to believe me. The evidence is quite damning, one of the court officials murmured. She had motive, another added. The king tested her loyalty recently, didn't he? Perhaps she took offense. I would never hurt him. Lira's shout echoed through the hall. I don't care what your evidence says, I didn't put that vial in my room. Someone else did. Who? Celine's voice was soft, almost pitying. Who would do such a thing? Lira's eyes locked on the princess. On that perfect, sorrowful expression. On the hint of something cold lurking beneath the sympathy. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The timing of Celine's arrival. The strange conversation in the corridor. The way she'd gripped Lira's hand. If you ever felt unsafe, you would come to me, wouldn't you? Not a promise of protection. A warning to stay quiet. You, Lira breathed. You did this. Celine's expression didn't change. I understand you're frightened, but accusations won't. You planted that vial in my room. Lira's voice grew stronger, more certain. You wanted me blamed. You wanted me gone. Sister, Kael said quietly, his voice strained. Is this true? Of course not. Celine's hand trembled as she set down the vial. Brother, she's desperate. She'll say anything to. Open it, Lira said suddenly. Everyone stared at her. The vial, Lira repeated, her apothecary training surging forward. If it's really hemlock extract, open it. Hemlock has a distinctive smell, musty, like mouse urine. Any trained nose can identify it immediately. Celine went very still. That's hardly necessary. Open it, Kael commanded. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Celine hesitated for just a heartbeat too long. Kael reached for the vial himself, his movements careful and controlled. He uncorked it and brought it to his nose. The room held its breath. This isn't hemlock, Kael said quietly. Celine's perfect composure cracked. The apothecary said. This is valerian root and chamomile. Kael's eyes lifted to his sister's face. A sleeping draught. Mild. Harmless. The kind given to children with nightmares. The apothecary must have made a mistake, Celine said quickly. Or perhaps there are multiple vials. Celine. Kael's voice had gone very soft. Very dangerous. Why would someone frame Lira with a sleeping draught instead of actual poison? I don't know. Unless, Lira said, the final piece falling into place, the point wasn't to have me executed for attempted murder. The point was just to have me removed. To have me discredited and sent away before. Before what? Lira's eyes widened. Before she could figure out what Celine was really planning. You wanted me gone, Lira whispered. Not because I was a threat to the king. Because I was a threat to you. Celine's mask slipped completely. Her sorrowful expression melted away, replaced by something cold and calculating. You have no proof, the princess said softly. Don't I? Lira's mind raced through every interaction, every strange detail. You've been gone for 6 months. The entire time the king was recovering from his assassination attempt. How convenient. I was visiting the Northern Territories. And yet you knew exactly where my quarters were. Exactly when I'd be away. Exactly how to frame me. Lira stepped forward. You've been watching. Planning. Waiting for the right moment to strike. This is absurd, Celine said, but her voice had lost its warmth. Brother, surely you don't believe this serving girl over your own sister. You called him brother, Kael said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Just now, Kael continued, his eyes never leaving Celine's face. You called me brother. You haven't done that since we were children. You always use my name, or my title. Always. Celine's hands clenched at her sides. Unless you're nervous, Kael said. Unless you're slipping. The silence was deafening. And then Celine laughed. It was nothing like her previous musical tones. This laugh was sharp, bitter, triumphant. Oh Kael, she said, shaking her head. You always were too clever for your own good. She moved like lightning. One moment she was standing beside the table. The next she had a dagger in her hand, small, wickedly sharp, the same design as the blade that had nearly killed Kael 6 months ago. And it was aimed directly at Lira's throat. Guards shouted. Officials scrambled back. But Celine was fast, so fast, her arm already swinging. Kael stood. Not slowly. Not painfully. He simply stood, smooth and powerful and completely whole, and caught Celine's wrist mid-strike. The room went absolutely silent. Celine stared at her brother in shock. You can walk? For months now, Kael said quietly. His grip on her wrist was iron. I lied about my recovery. To everyone. To draw out whoever tried to kill me. His eyes bored into hers. I never suspected it was you. Celine's facade shattered completely. Of course it was me, she snarled, trying to wrench free. It was always going to be me. I'm the one who should have inherited the throne. I'm the one with the mind for strategy, for politics. You tried to murder your own brother. You were never supposed to survive. Celine's voice rose to a shriek. The poison should have killed you instantly. But you're too stubborn to die properly, so I had to improvise. Keep you paranoid, isolated, suspicious of everyone around you. Feed you lies about threats that didn't exist, drive away anyone who might actually help you. The reports, Kael breathed. The intelligence about assassination plots. The warnings about traitors in court. That was all you. Every word. Celine smiled viciously. And you believed it all. You trusted me completely while suspecting everyone else. You pushed away advisors, allies, friends, all because your dear sister kept whispering poison in your ear. She turned her venomous gaze on Lira. And then this little nobody shows up and starts undoing months of work. Making you smile again. Making you hope. I couldn't allow that. So you tried to frame her, Kael said. I tried to remove her. Celine stopped struggling, her expression going cold and regal. It should have worked. You were supposed to believe the evidence. You were supposed to execute her or at least throw her in the dungeons. Instead you. She looked at him standing there, whole and strong, and something like despair crossed her face. You never needed that wheelchair at all, did you? This whole time, you were testing me. Testing everyone. Not everyone, Kael said quietly. Just those I suspected might be involved. And I passed every test. Celine laughed bitterly. The devoted sister. The concerned family member. I played my role perfectly. Until today. Until today, Celine agreed. But it doesn't matter now. Even if you arrest me, the damage is done. You've spent 6 months destroying every alliance you had. The court thinks you're paranoid and unstable. The people whisper that you're weak. I've already won. Guards, Kael said softly. They surged forward, restraining Celine even as she fought them. You'll regret this, she screamed as they dragged her toward the doors. The throne should have been mine. I deserved it. I'm the stronger one, the smarter one. Her voice faded as the guards hauled her from the hall. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Kael stood motionless, his hand still extended where he'd caught Celine's wrist, his expression shattered. And then slowly, he turned to look at Lira. The moment their eyes met, Lira felt something crack open in her chest. "You can walk," she whispered. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even a question. It was a statement of devastating fact. "Lira, you've been able to walk this entire time." Her voice shook. The wheelchair, the pretending, all of it was a lie. "I had to be certain." "You tested me with that disguise," Lira said, her words coming faster now, sharper. "You made me prove my loyalty over and over again. You broke my heart questioning whether I could be trusted." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "And this whole time, you were lying to me." "It wasn't about you," Kael said desperately. "I was trying to find the assassin. It was always about me." Lira's voice cracked. "Every test, every moment of suspicion. You demanded absolute honesty from me while hiding the biggest truth of all." She took a step back, then another. "I defended you," she whispered. "I told that man, told you, that your strength had nothing to do with your legs. I meant it. I believed it with my whole heart." "I know. But you didn't believe me." Lira's laugh was broken, hollow. "You couldn't trust that I was genuine, so you kept testing. Kept lying. Kept pushing me away while demanding I prove myself." She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "You're right, Your Majesty. You are broken. But not in the way you pretended. Not in the way anyone can see." Kael flinched as if she'd struck him. "Lira, please." "I can't." Her voice was barely audible. "I can't do this. I can't be near someone who will never, ever trust me. Someone who lies while demanding truth. Someone who..." Her voice broke completely. "Someone who makes me love him while ensuring I can never truly reach him." The admission hung in the air between them, raw and painful and irrevocable. Kael's face went white. "You love me?" Lira closed her eyes. "It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." "No." She opened her eyes, and they were full of exhausted sorrow. "Because you'll never believe it. You'll never trust it. You'll always wonder if I'm lying, if I'm playing some long game, if I'm secretly working for someone else." She turned toward the door. "You saved my life today," she said quietly. "I'm grateful for that. Truly. But I can't stay here. I can't keep breaking myself against the wall you've built around your heart." "Lira, wait." But she was already walking away, her footsteps echoing through the silent hall. And this time, Kael didn't follow. He stood there, finally visibly whole, and watched her leave. His wolf howled inside him, clawing at his consciousness, demanding he chase her, stop her, fix this. But Kael remained frozen. Because she was right. About everything. He demanded absolute honesty while lying. Demanded absolute trust while giving none. Demanded she prove herself while hiding behind deception. He'd saved her from Celine's blade. But he'd destroyed her with his own hands long before that. The court officials slowly filed out, their whispers already beginning. The story would spread through the palace like wildfire. The king could walk, the princess was a traitor, the serving girl had been vindicated. But none of that mattered. Because the one person whose opinion Kael actually cared about was gone. And this time, he had no one to blame but himself. Lira's hands shook as she folded her spare dress, the only other one she owned, and placed it carefully in her worn canvas bag. The servants' quarters were small, cramped, shared by 4 other women who were currently pretending very hard not to watch her pack. News traveled fast in the palace. They all knew what had happened in the audience hall. They all knew Princess Celine had been arrested for treason and attempted murder. They all knew Lira was leaving. "You don't have to go," Mira whispered from the next bunk. She was a kitchen maid, barely 16, with kind eyes. "The king cleared your name. You could stay." "I can't." Lira's voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, trembling as she gathered her few possessions. A comb. A handkerchief embroidered by her mother years ago. The small vial of lavender oil she used to help herself sleep. Everything she owned in the world fit in one small bag. "Is it true?" another girl asked quietly. That the king." She trailed off, but Lira knew what she was asking. Nothing happened, Lira said. Which was true, technically. And also the biggest lie she'd ever told. Because everything had happened. Just not the things they imagined. She'd fallen in love with a broken king who hummed off-key and pretended to need help he didn't require. She defended him with her whole heart while he tested her with lies. She'd believed in him, trusted him, cared for him. And he'd never believed in her at all. Lira secured the tie on her bag and stood. I'll be gone by sunset. Where will you go? Mira asked. Lira didn't have an answer. She had no family left, no other employment prospects, barely enough coin for a week's worth of bread. But she couldn't stay here. Couldn't walk these corridors knowing Kael was somewhere in the palace, whole and strong and forever out of reach. Couldn't keep breaking her own heart every time she saw him. She shouldered her bag and headed for the door. And stopped. Because Kael was standing in the doorway. Not in his wheelchair. Not with guards. Just, standing there, still wearing the formal clothes from the audience hall, his hair disheveled as if he'd run his hands through it too many times. He looked wrecked. Lira, he said quietly. Please. I need to speak with you. The other servants scrambled to their feet, curtsying hastily. Out, Kael said, his eyes never leaving Lira's face. All of you. Now. They fled. Lira stood frozen by her bunk, her bag clutched in white-knuckled hands. You shouldn't be here. This is the servants' quarters. It's not proper. I don't care about proper. His voice was rough, raw. I care about you walking out of my life without giving me a chance to. To what? Lira's composure cracked. To lie to me again? To test me again? To make me prove myself while you hide behind your walls? To apologize. The word hung between them, simple and devastating. Lira looked away. I don't want your apology. What do you want? I want to leave. She tried to move past him toward the door. Kael shifted, blocking her path. I can't let you go. You don't have a choice. I love you. Lira's breath caught in her throat. Kael stepped closer, his hands rising as if to reach for her, then falling helplessly to his sides. I love you, Lira. I've loved you since the third day you were assigned to me, when you threatened to force-feed me soup because I was being stubborn about eating. I've loved you through every moment of this nightmare I created. Stop. Lira's voice cracked. Don't do this. I lied to you, Kael continued, his words tumbling out like a confession he could no longer contain. I tested you when I should have trusted you. I pushed you away when you were the only honest thing in my life. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm begging you. He dropped to his knees. Right there in the servants' quarters, the king of Arinder knelt before a serving girl with nothing to her name but a canvas bag and a broken heart. Please, he whispered. Please don't leave. Not like this. Not when I've just found something real in a world full of lies. Lira stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You broke my heart. I know. You made me doubt everything I felt. I know. You demanded honesty while hiding the truth. I know. His voice broke. I know, and I will spend the rest of my life atoning for it if you'll let me. But please, Lira. Please don't walk away without giving me a chance to prove I can be better. That I can be the man you defended. The man you believed in when I didn't believe in myself. Lira closed her eyes, fighting against the part of her that wanted to drop her bag, sink to her knees beside him, and forgive everything. I can't be your servant anymore, she whispered. I don't want you as my servant. And I can't be your lover. She opened her eyes, meeting his devastated gaze. I can't be close to you. Not now. Maybe not ever. You hurt me too deeply. Kael's face crumpled, but he nodded. I understand. But... He looked up sharply, hope flickering in his eyes. Lira took a shaky breath. I'll stay. Temporarily. As a guest, not as staff. With my own chambers. My own life. No obligations to you. No promises. No intimacy. Anything, Kael said immediately. Whatever boundaries you need. I mean it. Lira's voice hardened. You don't get to visit me at night. You don't get to summon me to your chambers. You don't get access to my time, my space, or my heart unless I decide you've earned it. I understand. And if I decide to leave, truly leave, you let me go. No arguments. No royal decrees preventing my departure. No guards to stop me. Kael flinched but nodded. You have my word. Your word. Lira laughed bitterly. Forgive me if I don't find much comfort in that. The barb landed. She saw it in the way his shoulders hunched, the way his eyes closed briefly in pain. Good. Let him hurt the way she hurt. I'll arrange chambers for you in the guest wing, Kael said quietly, rising to his feet. Private. Comfortable. With your own staff if you wish. No staff. I'll take care of myself. As you wish. He hesitated, then added, thank you. For staying. For giving me this chance. Lira didn't respond. She simply picked up her bag and walked past him, out the door, leaving him standing alone in the servants' quarters. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a beginning. The guest chambers were beautiful. Lira stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed. High ceilings. Tall windows overlooking the palace gardens. A bed larger than the entire bunk space she'd shared with 4 other women. A private bathing room with hot water piped directly from the palace heating system. It was more luxury than she'd ever experienced in her life. And it felt wrong. She didn't belong here. Among silk curtains and plush carpets and furniture worth more than her entire village's annual income. She was a serving girl. An apothecary's daughter. A nobody. But Kael had promised her space, autonomy, control. So she unpacked her meager belongings, they looked absurd in the massive wardrobe, and tried to figure out what to do with herself. The answer came the next morning, delivered by a palace page who knocked hesitantly on her door. Miss Rowan? A letter for you. Lira took the sealed parchment warily. No royal crest. Just her name written in careful script. She waited until the page left before opening it. Lira. I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough. I know they can't undo the damage I've caused. But I need you to understand why I did what I did, not to excuse it, but so you can see the truth beneath my lies. 6 months ago, someone tried to kill me. The poison should have worked. I was minutes from death when the healers managed to purge it from my system. But the damage to my spine was severe. The physicians said I'd never walk again. I didn't believe them. I spent months in secret, working with a healer who specialized in nerve damage. Painful, excruciating months. But slowly, gradually, I regained movement. Sensation. Strength. I didn't tell anyone because I realized something. Whoever poisoned me thought I was helpless. Weak. Dependent on the people around me. If they believed I was still crippled, they'd grow confident. Make mistakes. So I stayed in that wheelchair. And I watched. And I listened. And I became paranoid. Every smile felt false. Every kind word felt like manipulation. I trusted no one, not my advisors, not my guards, not the servants who'd served my family for decades. When you were assigned to me, I assumed you were another spy. Another planted agent. I tested you because I was terrified of letting anyone close, only to discover they'd been sent to finish what the poison started. I'm not telling you this to justify my actions. I'm telling you so you understand, my lies weren't about you. They were about my own fear. My own broken trust. My own inability to see genuine kindness because I'd been surrounded by treachery for so long. You were honest with me from the first moment. You defended me, cared for me, believed in me. And I repaid that by doubting you at every turn. I'm sorry, Lira. I'm so sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know the truth. Kael. Lira read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into her dresser drawer. She didn't write back. The letters kept coming. Not every day. But regularly. Always delivered by different pages, always sealed, always written in Kael's careful script. Some were apologies. Some were explanations. Some were just observations. I saw a cardinal in the garden this morning. Its song reminded me of your humming. The palace feels empty without your voice in it. I found myself reaching for the chessboard tonight, then remembered you're not here to play. Lira didn't respond to any of them, but she kept them all. A week passed. Then 2. Lira established a routine: walks in the garden at dawn, reading in the library during the day, dinner alone in her chambers. She avoided the areas of the palace where she might encounter Kael. He respected that, never accidentally appearing in her path, never summoning her, never intruding on the space she'd claimed. But his presence was everywhere. Fresh flowers appeared in her room every morning, different varieties, always accompanied by a small card identifying them and their medicinal properties. An apothecary's reference, she realized. He was catering to her interests. Books on herbalism appeared on her desk, carefully selected, annotated in the margins with his thoughts. A new dress was delivered, simple, practical in her size, with a note: "I noticed your wardrobe was limited. No obligation to wear it. Just wanted you to have options. Small gifts. Small gestures. Never overwhelming. Never demanding. Just present." And despite herself, Lira felt her anger beginning to thaw. She found him in the gardens 3 weeks after their confrontation. It was early morning, mist still clinging to the rose bushes. She'd been taking her usual walk when she heard it. Humming. Off-key. Slightly flat. That familiar, terrible humming that had become the soundtrack to their strangest, most painful intimacy. Lira followed the sound and found Kael sitting on a stone bench, a book open in his lap, humming absently while he read. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his face. "Lira." He stood quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd be. I can leave." "No." The word came out before she could stop it. "Stay." Kael froze, uncertain. Lira sat on the opposite end of the bench, leaving careful space between them. "What are you reading?" He glanced at the book. A treatise on trust and governance. Dry. Academic. "I'm only reading it because my advisor insists I need to rebuild the court's confidence after." He trailed off. "After your sister tried to kill you and manipulated you for months?" "Yes. That." Silence settled between them, not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. "I've been reading your letters," Lira said quietly. Kael's breath caught. "You have?" "I haven't responded because I didn't know what to say." She stared at the mist-shrouded roses. "But I wanted you to know I read them. All of them. That's more than I deserve." Lira turned to look at him. Really look at him. He had shadows under his eyes, deeper than before. His clothes hung slightly loose, as if he'd lost weight. He looked exhausted. Haunted. Lonely. "Tell me something," she said. "And be honest. Anything. When you tested me with that disguise, when you pretended to be a commoner who hated the king, were you hoping I'd fail?" Kael flinched. "No." "Then what were you hoping for?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "I was hoping you'd prove me wrong. That my paranoia was unfounded. That at least one person in this palace wasn't lying to me." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I was hoping you were real. And when I defended you, when I proved I was genuine." "I was terrified," he whispered, "because then I had to admit I'd been cruel to someone who didn't deserve it. Someone who..." He swallowed hard. "Someone I was falling in love with. And I didn't know how to live with that. With the guilt of it. So I kept pushing you away." Lira felt tears prick her eyes. "You hurt me. I know. You broke my heart. I know. And I don't know if I can trust you again. I know." Kael's voice was rough. "But I'm asking you to try. Not today. Not tomorrow. But someday. When you're ready. If you're ever ready." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a wooden wolf, beautifully carved, no bigger than her palm. "I made this," he said quietly. "I'm not very good at woodworking, but I tried. It's meant to be." He hesitated. A reminder that wolves mate for life. That when they choose completely. Forever. He set it carefully on the bench between them. "I've chosen you, Lira. I know I've done nothing to deserve you choosing me back. But I wanted you to know. So when you look at this, you remember, I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as it takes." Lira picked up the carving with trembling hands. It was rough, imperfect, clearly made by someone learning the craft. But the care in it, the time it must have taken, spoke volumes. "You made this yourself?" she whispered. "Every night for the past 3 weeks. Kept cutting my fingers." He showed her his hands. Sure enough, there were small healing cuts on his fingers. "But I wanted it to be from me. Not commissioned. Not perfect. Just honest." Lira closed her hand around the wooden wolf, feeling its weight, its solidity. "I can't promise I'll forgive you," she said. "I know. I can't promise I'll love you back. I know. But..." She took a shaky breath. "I'll try. To see past my hurt. To understand what you went through. To give you the chance you're asking for." Kael's eyes shone with unshed tears. "That's more than I dared hope for." They sat in silence as the mist burned away and the sun rose over the palace gardens. Not touching. Not speaking. Just existing in the same space. And for now, that was enough. The healing was slow. Kael kept his distance, respecting every boundary Lira set. But he was present in small, careful ways. Notes left with her breakfast tray, asking about her day. Invitations to walk in the gardens, which she sometimes accepted, sometimes declined. Questions about her apothecary knowledge, asking her opinion on healing practices in the palace infirmary. He was rebuilding her trust the only way he could, through consistency. Through honesty. Through giving her complete control over the pace of their fragile reconciliation. And slowly, Lira began to see him. Not the paranoid king who'd tested her. Not the broken man in the wheelchair who'd needed her care. But Kael. Just Kael. The man who hummed off key when he was nervous. Who apologized to furniture when he bumped into it. Who spent hours carving imperfect wolves because he wanted to give her something honest. The man who'd been manipulated by his own sister, isolated by his own fear, trapped in a nightmare of betrayal that had nearly destroyed him. He wasn't perfect. But he was trying. And that mattered. One evening, 6 weeks after she'd agreed to stay, Lira found herself outside Kael's chambers. She'd been wandering the palace, restless, and her feet had carried her here without conscious thought. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. The door opened. Kael stood there, surprise evident on his face. "Lira. I was just..." She trailed off, uncertain why she'd come. "Do you want to come in?" he asked carefully. "No pressure. Just, if you want to talk." Lira nodded. The chambers looked different now. Brighter, somehow. The curtains were open, letting in evening light. Books were scattered on the desk. The chessboard sat ready on the small table. "I've been hoping you'd want to play," Kael said, following her gaze. "But I didn't want to ask. Didn't want to presume." Lira moved to the table and sat. "One game." Kael sat across from her, his expression carefully neutral even as hope flickered in his eyes. They played in silence for a while, the familiar rhythm of the game settling something anxious in Lira's chest. "I've been thinking about what you said," she murmured, moving her knight. "About being terrified when you realized I was genuine." "Yes. I understand it now." She looked up, meeting his eyes. Not just intellectually but here. She pressed a hand to her heart. "You'd been hurt so badly. Betrayed so thoroughly. Of course you couldn't trust easily. Of course you pushed away the things that felt real." Kael's hand stilled over his bishop. "That doesn't excuse." "No," Lira agreed. "It doesn't excuse it. But it helps me understand it. And understanding is the first step toward forgiveness." "Are you saying you forgive me?" "I'm saying I'm trying to." She moved her rook, capturing his pawn. "It's a process. Healing always is." Kael nodded slowly. "I'll wait. However long it takes." They played 3 more moves in silence. Then Lira said quietly, "Tell me about her." "About Celine. Before all this." Kael's expression shuttered. "Why?" "Because she's part of your story. Part of what made you who you are. And if I'm going to truly understand you, I need to know all of it." So Kael told her. About growing up with Celine. About their parents' deaths when he was 16 and she was 14. About how he'd tried to be both brother and parent to her. About how she'd seemed devoted, supportive, loving. About how thoroughly she'd fooled him. "I keep wondering when it changed," he said, staring at the chessboard. "When did she start hating me? Was it always there, hidden beneath smiles? Or did something I did push her toward this?" "It wasn't your fault," Lira said firmly. "Wasn't it? Maybe if I'd been a better brother." "You loved her. You trusted her. Those aren't failures." Lira reached across the table and very carefully placed her hand over his. "She made her choices. She chose ambition over love. Betrayal over loyalty. That's on her, not you." Kael stared at their joined hands, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "How can you be so generous to me when I was so cruel to you?" "Because I see you now," Lira whispered. "The real you. Wounded and afraid and trying so hard to be better. And that man is worth forgiving." A tear slipped down Kael's cheek. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." Lira smiled slightly. "But you're stuck with me anyway. At least for now. For now is more than enough." They sat there, hands joined across the chessboard, as the evening light faded into twilight. And for the first time since the throne room confrontation, Lira felt something other than pain when she looked at him. She felt hope. Week 1. Lira found herself listening for him. It was ridiculous. She had an entire wing of the palace to herself, deliberately chosen because it was far from Kael's chambers. She'd established routines specifically designed to avoid crossing his path unnecessarily. And yet, she found herself pausing in corridors, straining to hear that off-key humming. Found herself glancing toward empty doorways, half expecting to see him standing there with that careful, hopeful expression he wore whenever she appeared. She missed him. The realization struck her one morning as she sat alone in her chambers, reading one of the herbalism texts he'd left for her. The margins were full of his annotations, questions, observations, terrible puns about medicinal plants that made her want to laugh and groan simultaneously. She missed his voice. His presence. The way he looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. Even his wolf's aura, that wild protective energy she'd felt so strongly when he'd risen from the wheelchair to defend her. She hadn't felt it since. He'd been keeping it carefully leashed, giving her space. But she missed it. Missed him. The door to her chambers opened after a brief knock. A servant, not Kael, she told herself the disappointment was unreasonable, entered with a breakfast tray. "Miss Rowan? This came for you." Tucked beside the teapot was a small envelope. Lyra's heart did something complicated in her chest as she recognized the handwriting. "Lira, there's a court dinner tomorrow night. Formal. Tedious. Full of nobles who will spend 3 hours discussing grain taxes and trade negotiations. I was wondering if you'd consider attending. Not as my guest, as yourself. You'd have your own seat, your own space. No obligations to speak to me if you don't wish to. But I thought you might enjoy seeing the court from a different perspective. And selfishly, I'd like to see you there. The choice is entirely yours. K." Lira traced the signature with her fingertip, considering. She could decline. Stay safely in her chambers, maintaining the careful distance she'd established. Or she could take a risk. She picked up her pen and wrote a single word on a fresh piece of parchment. Yes. The court dinner was exactly as Kael had described. Formal, tedious, interminable. Lira sat 3 seats down from the king's table, wearing the simple but elegant dress he'd gifted her weeks ago. She'd almost chosen something else out of pride, then realized that was childish. The dress was beautiful. It fit perfectly. And wearing it wasn't a concession, it was a practical choice. At least, that's what she told herself. Kael caught her eye as she entered the dining hall. He didn't smile, that would have been too presumptuous, but something warm flickered in his expression. Recognition. Gratitude. Hope. The dinner proceeded exactly as predicted. Nobles droned on about harvests and tariffs. Ministers debated policy minutiae. Lira found herself suppressing yawns behind her napkin. Then, midway through the 5th course, a visiting dignitary made a disparaging comment about common folk and their limited understanding of governance. Lira's fork clattered against her plate. Every eye in the hall turned toward her. "Forgive me," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. But I believe common folk understand governance quite well. We understand when taxes are fair and when they're exploitative. We understand when laws protect everyone versus when they protect only the wealthy. And we certainly understand when those in power care more about appearances than the people they're meant to serve. The dignitary's face turned purple. How dare you? She dares because she's right, Kael said quietly. The hall went completely silent. Kael stood, his posture relaxed but his wolf's aura suddenly present, not threatening, but undeniably there. A reminder of what he was beneath the crown and formal clothes. Miss Rowan has more insight into effective governance than half the nobles in this room, he continued. Because she understands what real people need. What they value. What they're willing to fight for. His eyes found Lira's across the tables. And if more rulers listened to voices like hers instead of dismissing them, we'd have stronger kingdoms and fewer rebellions. The dignitary sputtered. Several nobles looked outraged. But others, younger ministers, a few of the more progressive council members, nodded thoughtfully. Kael raised his glass. To honest counsel. From whatever source it comes. After a heartbeat of shocked silence, glasses rose throughout the hall. To honest counsel, the court echoed. Lira felt heat rise to her cheeks as dozens of eyes turned toward her, some curious, some assessing, some openly hostile. But Kael's gaze was warm. Proud. I see you, that look said. I value you. Not despite where you come from, but including it. Something tight in Lira's chest loosened. After dinner, as the nobles dispersed into smaller groups for wine and political maneuvering, Kael approached her carefully. That was either very brave or very foolish, he said quietly. Probably both. Lira smiled slightly. But you backed me up. Of course I did. You were right. He hesitated, then added, would you walk with me? Just in the corridor. We don't have to talk if you don't want to. Lira considered. The smart thing would be to maintain her boundaries, return to her chambers, keep the careful distance she'd established. Instead she said yes. Week 3. They fell into a new pattern. Morning walks in the gardens, sometimes in silence, sometimes in easy conversation. Evening chess games in the library, neutral territory, where neither of them had to feel the weight of his chambers or hers. Occasional dinners together, just the two of them, talking about everything and nothing. Kael never pushed. Never presumed. He asked permission before moving closer, respected every no without question, gave her complete control over the pace of their fragile reconciliation. And Lira found herself seeking him out more and more. She'd pass by the council room and pause to listen to his voice as he debated policy. She'd find herself in the library at the exact time he usually read there. She'd accept his invitations for walks more often than she declined them. The anger that had burned so hot in her chest was fading, replaced by something softer. Warmer. Understanding. She saw how hard he worked to be better. How he questioned his own impulses, sought counsel from trusted advisors, admitted when he was wrong. How he'd transformed the court's approach to governance, incorporating input from common citizens through regular town forums. How he'd taken the lesson she taught him, about listening to voices beyond the nobility, and made it central to his rule. You're staring, Kael said one evening as they sat in the library, books open in their laps. Lira blinked. Sorry. I was just thinking. About how different you are now. From when I first met you. Kael set his book aside. Different how? Less guarded. More present. She struggled for the right words. When I first knew you, it felt like you were always watching yourself. Calculating. Testing. Now you're just, here. Real. That's because of you, Kael said quietly. You taught me that being vulnerable doesn't mean being weak. That trust is something you build, not something you demand. That real strength comes from honesty, not from walls. I didn't teach you that. I just showed you who I was. Exactly. His eyes met hers, intense and sincere. You were yourself, completely and unapologetically. And that gave me permission to do the same. Lira's breath caught. The library suddenly felt very small. Very intimate. Kael seemed to realize it too. He stood quickly, putting careful distance between them. I should let you read. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting. Lira stood as well. Actually, I was hoping we could talk. Really talk. About us. Kael went very still. All right. Lira took a breath, gathering her courage. I'm not angry anymore. I'm glad. Let me finish. She moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his eyes, the faint scar on his jaw from some long-ago injury. I'm not angry anymore because I understand now. What you went through. Why you couldn't trust easily. Why you pushed me away even when you wanted me close. Lira. I forgive you, she said simply. Kael's composure cracked. His eyes shone with tears he didn't bother to hide. You don't have to. I know I don't. But I do. She reached up, cupping his face with one hand. I forgive you, Kael. Not because you've earned it, though you have, but because holding on to that hurt was poisoning something good. Something worth saving. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Lira smiled, feeling tears on her own cheeks. Just, keep being this. The real you. The man who makes terrible puns in book margins and hums off-key and carves imperfect wolves because he wants to give me something honest. Kael laughed, the sound rough and wet. I can do that. They stood there, Lira's hand still on his face, his eyes searching hers. Can I hug you? He asked quietly. Just a hug. Nothing more. Lira nodded. Kael's arms came around her carefully, as if she might shatter. But when she leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, his embrace strengthened. Secure. Warm. Safe. Lira closed her eyes and felt his wolf's aura wrap around her, not possessive, not demanding, just present. A gentle hum of recognition. Of rightness. Wolves sense mates before hearts do. She'd heard that once, from a trader who claimed to have northern blood. Claimed that wolf shifters knew their true matches by instinct, by the way their beasts called to each other across distance and time. She'd thought it was romantic nonsense. Now, wrapped in Kael's arms, feeling that wild energy sing through her bones, she wondered if maybe it wasn't nonsense after all. Week 5. You're smiling more, Mira observed one morning when Lira visited the kitchens. Lira had made a point of staying connected to the servants who'd been her friends, refusing to let her new status separate her from them. She came down for tea regularly, helped with meal preparation when they'd let her, maintained the relationships that grounded her. Am I? She asked, though she knew it was true. You are. Mira grinned. It's the king, isn't it? You're forgiving him. I've forgiven him, Lira corrected. Past tense. Done. And what? And are you going to act on it? Mira leaned in conspiratorially. Everyone knows he's in love with you. Has been for months. The question is whether you're going to admit you love him back. Lira opened her mouth to deny it. Then stopped. Because it was true. Somewhere between the anger and the forgiveness, between the hurt and the healing, she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with Kael. Not the king. Not the wounded man in the wheelchair. Just Kael, complicated, imperfect, trying so hard to be better Kael. I do, she whispered. I love him. Mira squealed. So tell him. I can't just. Why not? Life's too short for someday. Tell him how you feel. Lira considered. Then smiled. Maybe I will. The frost flowers bloomed on the first night of true winter. It was a phenomenon unique to Dravaryn. Delicate blue flowers that only appeared when the temperature dropped below freezing, blooming for a single night before disappearing with the dawn. They symbolized new beginnings in northern lore. Fresh starts. Second chances. Lira stood in the gardens, wrapped in a heavy cloak, watching the frost flowers emerge from the frozen ground. They glowed faintly in the moonlight, ethereal and impossible. I thought I'd find you here. She turned to find Kael approaching, his own cloak pulled tight against the cold. His breath misted in the frigid air. I couldn't miss them, Lira said. They only bloom once a year. I know. Kael came to stand beside her, maintaining that careful distance he always kept now. My mother used to bring me out to see them when I was small. She said they proved that even in the coldest, darkest times, beauty could emerge. She sounds wise. She was. Kael smiled sadly. She would have liked you. Would have told me I was an idiot for nearly losing you. You didn't lose me. I came close. He turned to face her fully. Lira, I know we've been taking things slowly. Rebuilding trust. And I'm grateful for every moment you've given me. Every conversation, every walk, every chess game. But there's something I need to ask you, and I can't wait any longer. Lira's heart thundered in her chest. All right. Kael took a breath, his wolf's aura shimmering around him, visible now in the moonlight, a manifestation of his truest self. Not as your king, he said quietly. Not as someone with power or position or anything to offer except myself. But as a man who loves you more than he thought possible to love anyone, will you stay by my side? Not as a guest. Not as a temporary arrangement. But as my partner. My equal. My mate. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, the wooden wolf he'd carved for her, now hung on a delicate silver chain. I'm not asking you to be my queen, though you could be if you wanted, he continued. I'm asking you to be mine. And to let me be yours. Completely. Honestly. For as long as you'll have me. Lira felt tears spill down her cheeks, hot against her cold skin. I already am, she whispered. Kael's expression transformed, hope, joy, disbelief all flickering across his face in rapid succession. You what? I already am yours, Lira repeated, stepping closer. I have been for weeks. Maybe longer. I was just too scared to admit it. Too afraid of being hurt again. But I'm done being afraid. She took the necklace from his trembling hands and fastened it around her neck. The wooden wolf settled against her chest, right over her heart. I love you, she said clearly. Not despite your flaws or your mistakes. Not in spite of the pain we went through. But including all of it. Because that pain taught us both what really matters. What's worth fighting for. Lira, his voice broke. I choose you, Kael. I choose this. Us. Whatever comes next. Kael closed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in both hands. May I kiss you? You'd better, Lira said, smiling through her tears. His lips met hers, gentle and reverent and full of all the things they'd both been too afraid to say. Lira kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, forgiveness and love and trust hard-won and precious. Around them, the frost flowers bloomed brighter, as if the garden itself was celebrating. When they finally broke apart, Kael rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. I promise you, he whispered, I will spend every day proving I deserve this. Deserve you? You already do. Lira smiled. But I'll let you try anyway. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the blooming frost flowers, as snow began to fall softly around them. New beginnings. Fresh starts. Second chances. And love, not perfect, never perfect but chosen. Fought for. Real. 6 months later. The town forum was packed. Lira stood at the back of the hall, watching as Kael listened intently to a farmer's complaint about irrigation rights. He took notes, asked clarifying questions, treated the man with the same respect he'd show a foreign dignitary. This was his innovation, monthly forums where any citizen could bring concerns directly to the king. No intermediaries. No noble gatekeepers. Just people and their ruler, talking honestly about the kingdom's needs. It was messy. Time-consuming. Sometimes frustrating. It was also the most effective governance reform Dravaryn had seen in generations. Your Majesty makes this look easy, Lord Aldrich commented from beside Lira. The elderly counselor had become one of Kael's strongest allies after the Selene incident. But I suspect he has an excellent advisor. Lira smiled. He has many excellent advisors. True. But only one who holds his heart. It was public knowledge now, the king's relationship with the common-born woman who'd started as his servant and become his partner. Some nobles were scandalized. Others grudgingly approved. Most had learned to accept it because Kael made it clear, Lira wasn't going anywhere. Neither was he. The forum ended. Citizens filed out, many stopping to thank the king personally. Kael spoke with each one, remembered names, asked after families. Finally, the hall emptied except for Lira. Kael crossed to her, his expression softening into the private smile he reserved only for her. "How did I do?" he asked. "You were perfect." "Liar. I completely bungled the question about grain storage tariffs. You admitted you didn't know and promised to research it. That's not bungling. That's honesty." Lira reached up to straighten his collar, a gesture that had become automatic. "Intimate. Your people respect that." "Our people," Kael corrected gently. "This is your kingdom too now." It was true. They'd married 3 months ago in a ceremony that broke every protocol, a king wedding a commoner, no political alliance, no strategic advantage. Just love. The council had eventually accepted it because the people loved Lira. Because she'd proven herself invaluable in bridging the gap between crown and commoners. Because she made their king happy, and a happy king was a good king. "Come on," Lira said, taking Kael's hand. "You promised me a walk before dinner." "Did I?" "You did. Don't make me drag you." Kael laughed, that rich, genuine sound she'd worked so hard to coax out of him in the early days. "Wouldn't dream of it." They walked through the palace corridors hand in hand, past guards who nodded respectfully, past servants who smiled warmly. Lira had insisted on maintaining relationships with the palace staff, had fought for better working conditions and fair wages. Kael had supported every initiative, recognizing that a kingdom was only as strong as how it treated its most vulnerable. They'd learned that together. In the gardens, the roses were blooming, not frost flowers, it was too warm for those, but regular roses in every color. Lira had taken over the garden's medicinal herb section, cultivating remedies for the palace infirmary. "I have something for you," Kael said as they settled on their favorite bench. "You just gave me flowers this morning. This is different." He pulled out a folded piece of parchment. "Read it." Lira unfolded the paper and found a poem. "I used to think that trust was given, a gift bestowed by fate or heaven. But you taught me the harder truth. That trust is built, from root to roof, brick by brick and stone by stone, through honest word and deed alone. Not demanded, earned instead, by matching action to what's said. You broke my walls, you called my bluff. You loved me when I wasn't enough, and taught me that the strongest thing is not the armor but the heart beneath. So here I stand, my walls come down. No longer king, just man you found. And every day I'll choose again to be worthy of your love, my friend." Lira read it twice, tears blurring the words. "This is terrible." Kael laughed. "I know. I'm not a poet. It's also the most beautiful thing anyone's ever written for me." She kissed him softly. "Thank you." "Thank you," he murmured against her lips. "For seeing past my mistakes to the man I was trying to become. For teaching me that vulnerability isn't weakness. For choosing me every day." "Always," Lira promised. And she meant it. Because love wasn't perfection, it was choice. It was work. It was showing up every day and choosing trust over fear, honesty over performance, partnership over power. It was 2 broken people learning to heal together. It was a king who learned to kneel and a servant who learned to stand tall. It was frost flowers blooming in the coldest winter, proving that beauty could emerge from the hardest seasons. It was them. And it was enough.